Good evening. Welcome to the One Sky Overall Community Speaker Series, brought to you by Renison University College and the Waterloo Public Library. I'm Cord Egan, and I'm the Director of External Relations and Communications for Renison University College. The University of Waterloo and the Waterloo Public Library, the region where several of us live and work, is situated on the Haldeman Tract. This tract includes 6 miles on each side of the Grand River, granted in a legally binding treaty to the Haudenosaunee of 6 Nations by the Haldeman Treaty of 1784. The land inside and surrounding the Haldeman Tract, including Waterloo's Stratford campus, is the traditional territory of the Attawandaron, Anishinaabe, and Haudenosaunee. This area is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis groups and peoples. I encourage everyone attending this evening to take time to learn more about Indigenous people and histories within your own area, reflect on what you've learned with others, and connect these learnings to the work that you do each day. I'm really excited about tonight's event, moderated by Charmaine Hammond, who is a highly sought after keynote and workshop speaker. I think we may want her as a full-time moderator. She's an incredible gifted speaker. She's an entrepreneur, author, and educator who teaches and advocates the importance of collaboration, mental health, and healthy relationships. She is also the executive producer of the film Back Home Again, which illustrates the importance of community resiliency. And I'm also proud to say Charmaine is a graduate of Renison University College. Before passing it over to Charmaine, I'd like to just say a few words about this speaker series. Renison's original founders established the college's motto with the Latin phrase, sed coelum solum, or one sky over all. This phrase has evolved over the years to encompass all that we do. Renison believes deeply in contributing to a world in which social justice, diversity, and equity are not aspirations, but realities. We offer programs that improve our understanding of diverse languages and cultures, social and economic environments, and questions related to gender, spirituality, and a shared sense of belonging. Renison offers undergraduate degree programs in social development studies, honors arts, and honors arts and business. Our postgraduate programs include a Bachelor of Social Work and Master of Social Work with a focus on health. We offer classes for undergraduate students who choose to minor in applied language studies, East Asian studies, or studies in Islamic or Arab cultures. Renison also has a wide selection of community and professional education programs, so you can experience culture, engage in language learning, or explore spirituality through a dynamic selection of events, workshops, courses, and programs at your own pace. I thank you all for your interest in this series, and I'll now pass it over to Charmaine. Over to you, Charmaine.
Well, thank you so much, Cord, and it's always awesome to be involved with the alumni. So delighted to be here, and thank you to the Waterloo Public Library for hosting this. So as we dive in, I'm going to introduce our panelists and facilitate the conversation. And just to give some context, Fort McMurray, which is the community that this movie is based on, that was actually my home for 16 years. And I didn't live there at the time of the fires, but I was brought back to the community to work with the school boards and a number of nonprofit organizations around their resilience and recovery programs. And that's where I was actually introduced to the amazing Michael Mankowski. Some mutual colleagues said, you need to meet Michael. He's working on this incredible project related to mental health. And I know this is a real passion for you, Charmaine, around not only the community and mental health. And that's how I got involved with this project and have been working closely with Michael on it for the last 5 years. So as I introduce Michael, he is a celebrated and recognized screenwriter and director, and the screenwriter director of the Back Home Again movie, which we're going to be talking about today. He's a born and raised Fort McMurrayite, so also experienced the Fort McMurray fires. He's owner and operator of Alien Cow, which is the production company, and he's won a number of awards for his production. So excited to have you here, Michael. And then I'll introduce David, the Executive Director of the Canadian Mental Health Association in Alberta. And as he said, David has said before numerous times, we've been working on this with David almost since the beginning of what as well. And Canadian Mental Health Association is one of our very important partners, and they're bringing something very unique to this project. We're working very closely with David and his team, not only from Edmonton, but Fort McMurray with Buffalo, to create educational resources and tools that will support this film. David is a real leader in the promotion of mental health, not only in Alberta, but across Canada, and is a real catalyst for that connection between CMHA, the provincial government, non-government organizations, and community groups. And then we have Dr. Arshi Sheikh, who is an associate professor in the Department of Social Development Studies, Renison College, University of Waterloo. And she's a registered social worker in the province of Ontario and has published numerous articles, peer-reviewed journal articles, and presented papers at a variety of different conferences and events on the very topic of resilience, mental health, postpartum depression, aging, homelessness, and supportive housing. Really delighted to have all three of you here with us tonight for this conversation. And maybe I'll just get you to each unmute and maybe just say a word or two as we get ready to dive into some questions. So Arshi, if you just wanted to say hello, and then Michael and David.
Thank you, Sharman. I feel very privileged to be part of this conversational circle. I have lived through natural disasters, flooding and earthquake. I have personal lived experience of it, as well as I have worked with First Nation communities along the James Bay coast, in particular Kashacha First Nation community, as it repeatedly faces the issue of flooding, evacuation, and then rebuilding of the community, whatever that may look like, in complete isolation from the rest of the world. And I have used environmental justice and environmental racism frameworks to unpack the colonialism that permeates through these natural disasters. And I look forward to watching the video and conversing about Fort McMurray and people's resilience, community resilience, and mental health. Thank you.
Wonderful, thank you. And Michael and David. Michael, you're next on my screen, Michael, so you can say a couple of words and then we'll pass it over to David.
Perfect. I'd like to thank everyone who's listening out there and took the time to join us today. This project is very near to my heart. We've been working on it for a little over 5 years now, and we're very excited to finally release this at the Edmonton International Film Festival. It'll be the world premiere. And as Charmaine mentioned, I was born and raised in Fort McMurray and went through the evacuation. So and just excited to have eyes on this and to share our story with you guys today.
Thanks, Michael. David.
Yeah, pleasure to be with everybody tonight, and really excited to see the project moving along and starting to build momentum in so many different ways. And we knew that would happen, Charmaine and Mike, for sure. I started at the Canadian Mental Health Association as the provincial lead just after the floods in High River and Calgary had done incredible damage to that city and those communities around it. And we were part of the response and the recovery work there. And then Wood Buffalo, and then COVID. And so we've been in an environment of response to catastrophic disruptions, weather-related, et cetera. And it parallels so much the journey of people with mental illness who find their lives disrupted, and those who are supporting them find it that way. Communities that are disrupted because of the presence of suicide in their community, or heavy use of addictions and substance leading to addiction. Those are all disruptions too. And so we're learning through that lens about how to respond, how to be involved in the work of response, and how that blends into recovery.
Thank you, David. And you brought up a really good point about there's been these community disasters and then this shared global experience that everyone is living through right now with the pandemic, and it's impacting people in a variety of ways. And I know you've shared with us lots of stats over the last couple of years around how that looks from a mental health perspective. So we'll dive into that a little deeper. So I think right now we're going to turn on a very short video called The Heart of Back Home Again. And this will introduce you to the movie and to why the movie. And then we're going to dive into some questions. So I'll pass it over to Jessica to do her technology magic for us. And
Shifted direct.
We are strong, and we will keep doing our job.
The Fort McMurray wildfire, the impact was awe-inspiring, really, the power of Mother Nature. This was something Canada had never seen before. It's hard for the human heart to realize how much is lost.
This is a community that has faced an unthinkable chapter in its history, and catastrophic events have an impact on our mental health.
I was born and raised in Fort McMurray. We were first affected by the economy, the downturn in oil prices, then the wildfire, then the floods, then COVID.
What does recovery look like for a community? What does it look like for a family? And what does it look like for an individual?
I wanted to make a film that could help people by creating conversation and awareness around mental health. I wanted to give back to my community and telling the story of coming back home. I had so many powerful untold stories in our community, and I felt a documentary about this subject matter might be too heavy. I wanted this film to be relatable for children, so I took those stories and I rewrote them from the perspective of animals.
Wood buffalo forest is still evacuating and still under the constant threat of the beast.
We talked to a lot of mental health experts about the use of animation to break down barriers and give people comfort.
Michael was alongside of our teams, hearing people's voices about their experiences.
In the very foundation of this project was careful consideration and the gathering of experts to really consider what the weight would be.
And I wanted to make sure that we had all the diversity of Fort McMurray represented.
I'm so relieved to know my wife and son are safe.
This is the largest ensemble of award-winning Canadian actors in any film, and they all donated their time. They all wanted to give back to their country of Canada.
There are many animals all over the world that are calling you firefighters heroes.
I don't consider myself a hero. All the emergency responders, the police, volunteers that have left their homes, they are the real heroes to me.
Jeremy Renner, who voices a character in the film, also sings an amazing song at the end.
A new day rises from the ashes. A new hope rises from the pain.
This is a story about a community. It's a resilience movie. It talks about coming home, finding your community there.
I envision it as a healing journey for community members and families and schools.
Watch it with somebody so that you can talk about your experience.
This is a non-profit project that I hope to use to raise funds for Canadian Mental Health Association of Fort McMurray. I hope this inspires everyone to talk about mental health. This is really a personal love letter to my hometown of Fort McMurray, Wood Buffalo.
Oh, thank you, Jessica. Oh, I have seen that video so many times that I'm still brought to tears every time I see that. It's so powerful. And it sets the stage for the conversation that we're going to have tonight. So David and Archie, I'm going to start with you when we talk about disaster and the impacts of disaster. What are the impacts of disaster on mental health? David, maybe I'll start with you, and then Archie, we'd love to hear from you.
I think one of the things you need to realize is that within our population, as we're talking more and more about mental health challenges, mental illness, and the burden of care on those who support individuals in those situations, that's ubiquitous in our population. It's everywhere. 1 in 5 is probably a low estimation if we were to include addiction and mental health challenges such as anxiety and depression. And so that's there already. And then when catastrophes occurs, the pressure that's there pushes away the capacity of any population to be able to use their coping strategies that typically help keep them in a place of balance and being able to recover, come back to the quality of life that they enjoy. And so for those who are mentally ill, a catastrophe makes it much worse. For those who are living in a state of a mental health challenge or crisis, that escalates that. And then the broader population that is not necessarily aware of their mental health challenges, or that maybe they're living in a good place of balance, they're the ones too who really find that it's not just a physical loss or a disaster that's happening around them. There's changes to the way that their brain is working under stress.
Thank you, David. And Dr. Sheikh, same question to you. What are some of the impacts that you see on mental health after a disaster?
I mean, I do agree with David when he says that any type of catastrophe or disaster exacerbates mental health for individuals who are already facing mental health challenges. Even for those who may not have full awareness of their mental health are going to face trauma, grief, uncertainty. All of a sudden you are faced to put your mortality, possible mortality, morbidity, precarity of life, and there is a lot to process. I also want to emphasize that the individuals who face directly disasters are not the only ones who are impacted. There are going to be family members who are going to be away, but are going to worry about the safety and well-being of those who are facing the disaster. Their stress level, their anxiety may go up. Also, we need to understand that crisis workers, emergency workers, the frontline workers who provide support to other people, volunteers, sometimes we don't talk fully about the impact of disaster on their mental health. We just take their support for granted. And also when media telecasts such news, it can trigger trauma across the global community that has faced this form of, or that might have faced this form of disaster in the past. And one last comment I want to make is that we cannot divorce mental health, discourses about mental health in the context of disaster from the larger context of social justice, fairness, equity, intersectionality, who has privileges, who doesn't have privileges, and who even gets to engage in the conversation about mental health during or after disaster. So we have to look at the big picture here.
Thank you, Archie. So much to consider, so many impacts, so much to consider. And Michael, I know that you lived in Fort McMurray during the disaster, so you, like everybody else, went through the evacuation. And I also know that you were called back to the community very early to be able to, as a producer, film some of those testimonials or conversations with people about their experience. And I know you've watched hundreds of these conversations, and I can only imagine what that would be like for you experiencing this and then watching these conversations that you're then turning into a movie and watching them over and over and over again. What, from your experience, what were some of the impacts that you saw on people as it related to mental health? And I know this was a big part of the reason you were inspired to create this movie was because of that.
Yeah, I was definitely, I had the opportunity to work with the Red Cross during the re-entry process, also the 1 year and 2 year anniversary of the wildfire, and recorded hundreds of testimonials of people who were affected by the wildfire. And I struggled. I was having a hard time, like a lot of the people in the community. But the one thing I did notice is that by filming those interviews, it was a healing process for me. A lot of the things I was struggling with, didn't seem as important or as big as a problem once you start talking to, an indigenous fur trader who lost his way of life, or a child who lost his bedroom, or you go to a teacher and she's, cleaning out the school and all the belongings, throwing them away and can't give them to the children, or the mascot of the school's gone. And it was a very eye-opening situation for me. And I did a lot of work for other publications during that time. And I struggled with the way they represented our community. I found a lot of times I would, film a lot of this stuff and then you would send it off to get edited, and it didn't represent the community that I felt, or represent this, the community that I felt, that I grew up in. And I wanted to tell a story of what it was like, not about going through the fire, but what it was like to rebuild. And that's kind of how this came to be, is I wanted to focus not on where we were, every year, what happened on the fire every year. You watch the same footage, same evacuation, someone leaving town, and how do we move past that and start focusing on where we are today. And I didn't think it would take 5 years to get here today, but I'm really glad we started this journey.
Yeah, thank you for that, Michael. And great things sometimes take a long time to sort of get their running shoes on and be launched to the world. So we're almost there. And it was a really important point that you brought up, Michael. And I heard Archie kind of concur with that around people can be re-traumatized by what they're seeing in social media and in media. One of the other things that I wanted to ask is that when we think of communities rebuilding, Michael, because you've just led us beautifully into that conversation, you wanted to create this movie and talk about the process of rebuilding. And I know the process of rebuilding involves collaborations and people working together. We've seen this in Fort McMurray, Wood Buffalo. We've seen this in other communities. And I thought, David and Archie, I would love to hear your perspectives on, and then I'm going to come to you, Michael. If you can talk about the role that collaboration plays in helping communities regain resilience, recover after a disaster. What is that? What is the role of collaboration, and how does it help or nurture a community through that process?
I think that what happens again, there's always sort of a baseline, like there is with mental health. There's the baseline. There's already a community there when the disaster happens. They've already interacted with each other. They have alliances, collaborations, and approaches to problem solving for the ordinary activities of any given community. Under pressure, I think that there is sort of that split between getting organized and making sure that it's the right help at the right time for the right people, right community. And I guess a good example of that, Charmaine, is when we were taken to see some of the evacuation centers of from the fire, when folks were coming from Fort McMurray and down into Edmonton and other communities. They wanted Canadian Mental Health to come take a look, and there was a table with a sign kind of hanging sideways saying mental health support. And there was nobody at that table except a worker with some pamphlets. And it reminded me a little bit of CMHA, where sometimes we think it's, which people just need more information, but where the real work was being done and where the real recovery was starting very early, right? These folks had not gone home yet, was where people sat knee to knee, drinking a cup of coffee, sharing their phones, sharing their stories, and emoting around that with volunteers or with other folks who have been evacuated. It starts very early. It starts the second somebody is impacted. The opportunities for recovery and to support through, and we need to realize that, because I think very often response is about getting those ATCO trailers, and people think it's that, but it's really the beginning of a community finding its way back home.
Beautiful, thank you. And it's interesting, David, because you kind of get to that piece about some of that collaboration isn't necessarily formal. Much of it happens in an informal basis. And I remember early on when I first met you, you talked to me about the power of connection, how important human connection is. And, I'm hearing you say that again tonight. Thanks, David. And Dr. Sheikh, what about from your perspective, what role does collaboration play in helping communities recover, heal, and build resilience after a disaster? What does that look like, and what do we need to consider?
There are two ways in which I would like to answer your question, and I'll be brief, Charmaine. I remember your instructions. First thing we need to remember is when a disaster strikes, the collaboration and partnership, either at grassroots levels, formally, informally, at multiple levels, begins right there. And then when people begin to pass information, when people begin to prepare for evacuation, that is a massive operation, the evacuation itself. People from that community are removed and brought into other communities. Those other communities have to collaborate and partner to receive the climate refugees within your own country or outside your own country. So collaboration and partnerships start before even we reach the recovery stage where we can bring people back home. And at what stage do we begin to bring people back home? When is it safe? When it is not safe? And whose voices get heard in these partnerships? How the power plays out in these partnerships? These are important factors to take into consideration. And the second point I want to make is, how do communities heal when they remain in isolation in remote locations? They do not get media coverage and they languish in obscurity, like Kashatchewan First Nation. So I have like two case examples now, Fort McMurray and Kashatchewan First Nation, and how natural disasters are managed and the impact on people's lives. And I see completely different approaches here.
Yeah, I thought it was so interesting when you said that that process of collaboration starts so much earlier on, and so important for us to remember. And the other piece that I'm really drawing from both what you and David has said is that there's so many layers of complexity in this, so many things to consider. Not only relationships, not only collaborations, how organizations partner and fund things. So thank you very much for that. And I'm seeing some questions in the Q&A box, which I'm going to come to very shortly. So thank you, and continue to put your questions in there because we will be getting to those shortly. The next question I wanted to, and Dave, actually, Michael, I want to go to you because collaboration is a big part of even how this movie came to be. And what's your take, Michael, on the role that collaboration plays in disaster recovery and then even in this project?
Yeah, well, disaster recovery, I witnessed it when when I was filming all the stories of, coming together and rebuilding as a community. A lot of these events were put on by different companies in town and nonprofits, and everyone was, contributing, whether it be food or banners or events or trying to bring people together because everyone was in a hard place, and, also trying to, celebrate also the first responders and all the people that were, instrumental in making sure that our, community was still standing. So I witnessed, I had a new appreciation for the word community, actually, after witnessing all that. And that's really what I wanted to showcase, was just the community. And this film would never have come together if it wasn't, the community that helped us get there. It started off just slowly, we're talking to local nonprofits and, doctors, play therapists. Eventually we connected with CMHA, and David helped us take it to the next level. And, I worked with Red Cross over the years, and then to go back and have Red Cross as, a sponsor and partner and supporting champion was a huge win for this. And also a lot of the actors, were actually affected by the wildfire. Kim Basner, she lost her home in the wildfire, and Martin Short was evacuated the day we recorded with him. So it's a lot of shared experience, and collaboration is a key in filmmaking, and I think rebuilding, and that's ultimately, part of the message we want to tell is just, collaboration, community. Those are the key words, I feel like,
Yeah. and they all start with C. They're easy to remember. Thank you, Michael. And I'm going to go to a question in the chat box. I was going to find my glasses and I can't find where I put them. So I'm going to, sorry for my face being very close on the screen here, but I want to be able to read it. Mary from BC is saying, thank you for the session. All of us are dealing with COVID and all the trauma that's associated with that. Some of the stories I'm learning just shake me to the core. And from a leadership perspective, how can we help build resilience among our respective questions? What if our respective communities? How do we help build resilience along our respective communities? Thank you so much for the question. That is actually a really great question. And Archie, do you want to comment on that first, and then maybe David can pick up on that as well?
I'm not sure how best I can answer this, but if you are in a leadership position, I would say you examine yourself first. You see yourself first, you hear your own voice first, and then you begin to see and hear voices of other people. It's important not to create this distance between us versus others, that we are the leaders and the others are the recipient of care and they are the needy people. It's very important to start seeing oneself as a human being first, and the impact of COVID on oneself first before we begin to understand the impact on other people. That's all I have to say at the moment.
That was beautifully said. Thank you. Wow. Thank you. David.
What does Dave say now, right? Yeah.
What do you say now, Dave? Thank you so much, Archie.
Yeah, I think it's very true that we all experience loss, and it's a part of the way we live. And to a greater or lesser degree, disasters and catastrophes that occur, whether they're natural or man-made, they're an experience of loss. And the building of resilience, you know, ironically, the foundation of it is that loss and that upheaval that's there. You will not be, or you will not experience resilience if you don't know or experience that loss. There's no need for it. And so in those, I think part of what the story tells in the movie is, you know, that those who came back had a story to tell. They could share their story. And just the simple act of coming back to the community was a statement of resilience. And we saw in our own team, our own office up in Wood Buffalo, witnessed people coming home and seeing, you know, no physical structure there, but still identifying with that place on the street as their home. Yeah. So there's something really powerful to the idea that, and for those who were able to, many didn't come back. And you wonder what happened and what the resilience story was for those who didn't come back, because that would have been a choice as well. But being empowered to make choices is part of resilience.
Yeah, thank you. Wow, well said. And before we wrap up tonight, we're not wrapping up, but I wanted to give everybody a heads up. Michael has done a brand new trailer for the movie that we'll be able to see tonight before we wrap up the call, and you'll actually in there see some other vignettes from the movie, and it will really give you a flavor of what our panelists are talking about. When we think about healing after a disaster or a community crisis or a pandemic that we're all living through, how do we heal? How do we help each other? Like, what does that look like? And I'm hearing this so much from people that I talk to right now about living through a pandemic, you know, right now. So forest fires are one type of crisis and disaster, and now we're dealing with this. And what I'm hearing a lot of people ask me is, how do we heal? How do we help each other as communities? What does that look like? And how long is the process? And David, I remember a conversation that I believe was with you and Jen from Red Cross, and you were talking about, you know, that healing through disaster is not kind of a destination, you just get there. It's a long journey, and for many people, a very complicated lengthy journey. So I'm wondering if all three of you can just speak to, as communities recover from any kind of a disaster or the pandemic, what are some things people can do to heal and regain resilience and mental wellness? Who wants to start off with that one? David?
Yeah, sure. I think the most important thing that comes as a result of a community being disrupted, and that community could be a family, it could be a unique group of people within a larger community, it could be the entire municipality. But what is so remarkable is that the way that people heal, we often think about big resources and expensive resources, psychologists, psychiatrists, and there's nothing wrong with that, you know. And we think about those frontline workers and first responders and all of that. Very important part of seeing a community recover. But I think I have often said it, and I'm not sure I always win the admiration of my colleagues on that, but I often say some of the best therapy really happens when people sit down at a kitchen table and talk about what they've experienced. And I think we all noticed that with COVID, that when we were allowed to talk to people who weren't in our bubble, the first thing you had to do was tell your story. And while it might have been upsetting or difficult to tell, and you know, very difficult places people were put in, that's the beginning of the discovery of shared experience. I wasn't alone in this. I might have been alone physically, but other people were experiencing it as well. The pain that was experienced, the loss or the indignity, often those things are all part of catastrophes. When we know we weren't the only one, that we start to build a different community, don't we? Because it's a community of people who have shared lived experience. That is the beauty of better mental health, is finding out that you're not the only one.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you. The importance of connection. And Michael, just to comment on what David said, I remember in one of the first conversations, Michael, that we had, and I remember where we were sitting when we had this conversation, and you shared something about your experience where you were talking about, you said something like, thank goodness for playing cards. You have no idea how many good conversations came over just people getting together, wherever that was, and having a conversation while doing something like playing a game of cards or something. So what's your take on having lived through this and working with and talking to so many people who are recovering from a variety of different disasters and COVID? What do you think is important around healing, and what does that look like?
Well, I love what David said. I truly believe that, you know, that's the case. I witnessed that firsthand with almost all my interviews, actually, because I had that shared experience with someone, and just talking to them of what they went through. Most of the time, the individual I was interviewing would, you know, get extremely emotional, break down. And most of the time as well, they would start off that they're okay, you know, and then when this happens and they start talking about it, you know, they would become just extremely emotional and start remembering. And which also makes me emotional. And then, you know, we're emotional together, and you know, you're talking about it. And I could feel like, you know, there was some cathartic like experience or healing going on as just by sharing, you know, what they went through and their experience and their story. And it was not only just with the people like who in Fort McMurray, but even cast members like Kim Basener, like, you know, she agreed to do this part, and then she's reading the script of you know, it says fine. And then we show up to record day one, and she can't record it. She starts reading and she starts crying. She starts thinking of a mom just like herself who, you know, lost everything in her cave, and she's playing this mama bear. And I witnessed that with the cast and people in the community, and even just like, it was just a really surreal experience. And I think there's a lot of just like, you know, as David said, it's like, it's great to go to the therapist and do all these things and to have, you know, all the professionals. That's very important. But I think just the simple act of talking to someone and asking, are you okay, is extremely powerful.
Yeah. I actually love that part of the movie, Michael, where Kim Basinger is with her bear family. And I don't want to give too much away, but I love the conversation that they have around what their future will look like as their bears return to the home and as they rebuild, and, you know, as life starts to come back, whatever that looks like. Thanks, Michael. And Dr. Sheikh, what about you? What do we need to know around healing, and as communities heal, what can we do to support one another?
I'll just add another dimension to this conversation, to what David and Michael said already. We need to examine our relationship with the ecosystem. We need to examine our relationship with the environment, with the forest, with the animals, with the plants. We need to somewhere trust the intelligence that the nature contains within itself. And is there something for us to learn? How does the forest heal? How do animals heal? How do plants heal? Why does forest fire happen? Is there an inherent intelligence in natural disaster? And is it really a disaster? Or does it become a disaster when natural phenomena impacts human life? What if a wildfire was to take place where there was no human habitation? Would we still call it a disaster? So I think so we have to turn to the nature itself to learn.
Wow. Beautiful. Thank you. What an interesting insight. Thank you for that. Ooh, juicy questions. And for any of you that are here, or juicy answers, for any of you that are here with us tonight, if you've got questions popping up, we are going to be turning to you soon as well. So another question that I wanted to deal with before we put on the other part of the movie for people to see is the trailer. Michael and I have heard this so many times. I've heard it. In fact, I heard it in a training session that I was leading a few weeks ago. And the question that I hear from people is, I don't know what to say. So if I have a colleague, a friend, a community member, someone I work with that I'm concerned about, or that appears different in some way, and I'm concerned about what might be happening to them, how do I start a conversation about mental health? How do I let someone know I'm concerned about them and there to support them? So people are always asking us, like, how do we have this conversation? I know, and that's just at the core of one of the reasons why Michael created this movie, was to get people into conversation. And we heard David say in that the Heart Of video that we just watched, David, you said something to the effect of, watch this with someone. This was meant to be watched with someone so you can talk about it. And so let's take that a little bit deeper. And how do we talk about it? So when people are asking us, what do I say? What's that conversation starter? What can you offer us? And this is to all three of you, just to get that conversation going, to inspire those dialogues.
I think people are often intimidated by the idea of what would they say if they ask or they inquire and say, you don't quite seem yourself, or is there something that I can help you with? I think the reason that question doesn't get asked, because that's a fairly okay question to ask, is that they're thinking, I don't have what it takes to help if the answer is, I'm not okay, or I'm really struggling. I think we are uniquely qualified to support and encourage help-seeking behavior more and more as we live through and experience the change and the disruption that comes. And one of the things that COVID has brought forward is the idea of checking in. And so, I mean, it would be that easy to say, Charmaine, in COVID, we were asked to check in with our neighbors. And I've just noticed that lately it's been hard for you. Is there something you want to talk about? Is there a way that we could help? And the thing is, we actually have a lot more resources than we ever thought, or we ever have had in our country, for people to lean on and access without us having to have all the answers. But the most important thing is to establish that safety, to say, here's a place where I'm inquiring. We need to make sure it's sort of in the right environment, but to inquire and say, there's something different, Charmaine. Would you like to talk about it? And if it's a no, it's a no. We have to take a no as good as a yes, right? Yeah. At least you reached out, you've offered.
Yeah, I like how you framed that. It's almost like an invitation. So, as you asked that, David, I'm not feeling forced to respond. It doesn't feel like you're prying. It sounds like you're coming from a place of true concern and compassion. And I've found that sometimes, even if it doesn't come out the way you entirely wanted it to, when you come from that place of true compassion people are forgiving if you said the wrong words. They're often just so relieved that you notice and the conversation is now started.
Sorry, I'm going to add one more piece. That's a very critical piece, is that not only do we think we might not be able to point people in the right direction to get help, we also think we're going to use the wrong language, because there's the language police are everywhere. It's around mental health. And we need to remember it's 100 years old. All of this language is about 100 years old. And so we're still learning how to use it and how to use it appropriately and within the right context. And so to shut something down because the wrong word was said or because it felt a little awkward in the acts of humanity, offering help or offering an observation about a change in somebody's behavior is to be expected. And maybe us Canadians aren't so great at receiving that, but I think we're learning to say yes to help.
Yeah, that's great. And so many people are affected so many ways just by what we're all living through right now. Thank you. And Dr. Sheikh or Michael, either of you want to comment on that same question?
Yeah, I can add on. Going. I can add something on to what David said. I loved the end there of just, you know, often when I would do these interviews, I found a good way to disarm people is similar to what David said, is I would just kind of be extremely transparent and tell them, like, you know, this, today we're going to have a talk about, you know, the wildfire, and I'm going to ask you some questions, but I just want to let you know that this is a topic that I struggle with. This is something that, you know, I went through just like you. And if I get emotional today, you know, please don't hold that against me. And if I start crying when you're talking and, you know, I had to look away, it's not because, you know, I'm not interested. It's because, you know, I'm trying to not break, you know, the interview. And often when I would explain that, like, and I'm having a hard time today, like, you know, just driving, because a lot of times too, like you go to these, you're touring someone's home or like something that has really been devastating, right? So I would right away from, like, before we even film or take out the camera, I tell them, like, this is going to be really hard for me today. I'm going to try and do my best. And at the end of this, you're going to have a chance to, you know, veto or you know, make sure that you're happy with this, but I'm going to make sure that you're protected and this looks great. And usually by kind of just disarming them and telling them that I'm struggling with this, right away, I could see their, like, you know, their demeanor would change. Because a lot of times when you go ask people, like David said, like, how are you doing or whatever, especially with a camera, the natural answer is like, good. Like, they don't want to give you more than 2 words. So it's really hard to have like a genuine conversation. And I would always try and set it up where it's like the camera's over my shoulder. You're not looking at the camera, you talk to me, and I'm just trying to talk about our shared experience. And yeah, that's all I really have to add. But
oh, that's great. I forgot to unmute myself there. That's great, Michael. Thank you.
Thank you.
Dr. Sheikh, did you want to add to that?
I'm not very good at initiating conversations, to be honest with all of you, but I know how to sit in silence with somebody who is suffering. Oh, maybe I should mute myself now.
Oh, I just got goosebumps when you said that.
Yeah, that was very, 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 very
wow.
powerful. Yeah, I know that exact experience of how important just that is.
Yeah.
That is again another act of humanity, right? To be present when words fail or there's nothing to say or no way to say it. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's such an important reminder, because I see a lot of people. I had this conversation the other day where someone was feeling really badly because they didn't know how to help a colleague and they felt like they should be supporting, and they were worried that the person would be upset and they didn't know what to say, and all this is going on for them. I can only imagine the stress and the turmoil. And I love what you've said, Archie, is sometimes it's sitting with them in silence. And that's very powerful. Thank you for raising that. And I know we've got another question coming up. Let me look at this question, and then just to give Jessica a heads up, once we do this question, we'll watch the other short video clip, and then we've got another question about coping that I'll ask the panelists. So I found my glasses. Let's look at this question. All right. Thanks for a really interesting discussion. I agree with you. It's super interesting. Curious about the healing process. Curious about the healing process when someone is going through a personal trauma versus a community disaster where people are experiencing trauma together. Is it easier to go through something as a part of a group, or is it just different? Wow, what a great question. All right.
I think this speaks to the power of peer support, right?
Mm-hmm.
Even an individual who's experiencing a challenge to their mental health and want to experience better mental health, alone is a very tough place to try to work that all out.
Yeah.
With a professional, it can be helpful, but with somebody who's been there, you know, it's a difference between a travel agent and a tour guide. The tour guide has been there and walks you through it, as opposed to a travel agent who says, here's a brochure and it looks really great, you know, like you're going to enjoy it. So I think that's a critical piece is most communities have some sort of peer-to-peer support or opportunities online to do so, so that once again, it removes that idea of being other or odd and puts us in the place of being part of yet another circle or another community that understands and can testify that the day will come, or a day will come, where better mental health begins to show up on the horizon. Sometimes just the slightest little bit of light. That's what I've seen in my career over and over again in places where people share their experience.
Thank you. And Archie or Michael, did you have any comments to add to that one? All right. Oh.
Nailed it.
Yeah, that's hard for me. That's hard for me to add on to. Honestly, it's yeah. I think yeah, it's. I think, you know, in there's power in numbers. I'm just gonna. That's the only thing I'll add to it. I think it's lots of times when you try and, I don't know, just to think of myself, it's like, you know, before I even started this project, it's like I didn't tell anyone I was, you know, struggling or anything. You know, as I started writing this and talking to other mental health professionals, and, you know, they'd be like, what's the purpose of this? Or why are you doing this? What's your intention? I realized it's like, whoa, I'm struggling. And like, I started this project probably because like you know, I've witnessed a lot, and I'm not sure how to, like, you know, what to do with all of it. So it's like, it started just as like a journal entry, and then it evolved into a movie. So it's like, but I think through talking to more people, the thing I learned was like, whoa, okay, this is something I'm struggling with. And I came to terms with it once I started talking to others. And like, you know, the more people I tell now, or, you know, talking about it today publicly, like all that helps me. So I think there's something good about just like sticking it out in the universe, getting things off your chest, you know, as simple as that sounds.
Yeah. And Archie, I see you've unmuted. Thank you, Michael. Did you want to add something, Archie?
Yes, I think so. Personal trauma also occurs within the larger social cultural context. So even though it may appear very personal, and it may appear as if I'm the only one right now going through this trauma and everybody seems to have a perfect life, that might not be the reality. There is always an alternate reality. There are always going to be people who would have gone through similar experiences, similar traumas, not at a collective level, maybe in very isolated way they might have dealt with it. But there are human beings out there who have gone through similar experiences. There is no way that our personal trauma is so unique in a sense that we cannot find another human being who would not understand what is going through.
Yes.
But finding such people that one can share with can be an arduous process.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, and you've brought us back to sort of that importance of connection and relationship. There's a comment here I just wanted to read out to all of you that says, "This is blowing me away, sitting together in silence, being a tour guide rather than a travel agent. I'm listening in tears. Thank you so much." Really powerful information. So I thought maybe at this point we would put on another video clip for you all to get a glimpse into some other parts of the movie. And then we've got another question to ask the panelists, and we welcome your questions as well. So I'm going to lean on Jessica again for her technology magic, if we're able to get the this trailer up. And the video that we're going to show you, it's the new trailer for the film, and you can watch it on YouTube as well. So we'll make sure everyone gets the link.
Wood Buffalo Forest is still evacuating and still under the constant threat of the beast. Everyone who lives there was forced from their homes as crews continued to do their best to stop the flames from spreading.
Oh man, it was like something right out of a movie. Whoosh! You never saw anything like this in your whole life. As I was swimming, right, I could see the beast stretch across the side of the pond. The flames were they were as high as the trees!
Coined the beast, it devoured everything in its path, destroying homes within minutes. Nothing stood a chance against the beast's power. Over 88,000 animals were forced to run for their lives.
There are many animals calling you firefighters heroes.
All the emergency responders, the police, volunteers that have left their homes, they are the real heroes to me.
Back home again, back home again, back home.
We will rebuild and we will be stronger.
To the hills and stones and streams, back home.
In showing us the worst, the beast brought out the best.
Back home again, to the hardscape of our dreams. Back home again.
The cause is unknown, but officials have ruled out lightning and say it was likely caused by human activity. Go figure.
Can you hear meow?
Loud and clear.
Meow?
Start anytime.
Meow?
Thank you, Jessica, for your technical support there. You know, one of the things as I was listening to our conversations tonight about collaboration and working together and support, and I'm seeing that displayed in the little clips that we saw. So I'm going to put this out to all of you that are with us here tonight if you've got questions, and I'm going to queue up the next question. And Michael, was there anything else you wanted to say about that particular video before I go into another question?
That is our official trailer, just completed a couple days ago, and that bar on the top is not there. I'm sure that was just like a little technical thing, but yeah, no, other than that, we appreciate anyone sharing it and helping us get the message out.
Yeah, thank you. You know, when I watched this too, I was thinking about a conversation I had recently. One of you reminded me of this through your answers. I was talking to an individual who works at Paul Davis Restoration, and they're one of our partners on the film. And something really struck me because they go into homes and families when there's been a flood, when there's been a fire in someone's home, when there's been a natural disaster. And the conversation was around, you know, Paul Davis Restoration was saying, you know, we go into people's homes when they're in their moment of feeling completely vulnerable, or when something awful has happened in their life, and the importance of showing up, being present, having empathy, showing empathy is so important. And I know that all of you have touched on that at different ways tonight. And the other piece that I wanted to capture is we were talking about collaboration earlier, and there are so many parts in that little clip in the movie that model collaboration, you know, people working together to rebuild the community, families working together to plant trees. So we've got another, let's see, question, comment. Let me put my glasses on so I can read. Okay, so really liked the comment about sitting in silence, and I wonder if the panel can speak to some self-healing aspects. Well, you are asking the right question, because that is the next question we're going to be covering. So we will be talking about that. What great timing. I love how you're just leading the question to where we need to go. And also a comment, love the trailer. So with Mary's question around some self-healing aspects, that was actually one of the questions we wanted to talk about, is what can we do to rebuild resilience? What can we do to promote self-healing? What are some strategies and tips? Because we're all living through a pandemic now. So these are things that help not just with a forest fire and recovering after disaster, but just coping with day-to-day life and the stressors and the impacts of that. What are some tips, David? And then I'm going to pass it over to Dr. Sheikh and Michael.
I think we know when our life is disrupted, and I think, you know, on a deep level, we're able to discern that the rhythm of our life has been intercepted by something that has set us on edge, maybe it's a way to say it, or has, you know, you always think about the restaurant table that you sit down at and one foot is just not quite high enough, and you do everything to try to put things underneath there just to level it off. The pursuit of mental health and well-being, and recognizing that there's no such thing as perfect mental health, or a certain person that has a evidence of perfect mental health, that just isn't there, because our mental health is on a continuum that shifts based on what's happening in our lives, in our environment, indeed, you know, the entire world around us. And when we're aware of that, it is both an individual journey and a community journey, I guess is a way to say it, or a family journey. That very rarely and very sadly, people face these kinds of challenges alone. It does happen.
Right.
And I can remember a lady telling me when we were doing interviews on depression in Canada, depression where medication wasn't helping, her saying to me, if one more person tells me all I need to do is take a hot bath and light some candles. And then she said a bunch of other stuff after that. And I remember thinking that, because so often we're looking for like the prescription, the exact 5 steps that we should take to regain that sense of balance or well-being. It's an individual journey, and one that we have to let people set their own pace very often and guide their own path for it to be effective. Right. Prescription or prescriptive kind of approaches, while those 10 tips at the back of the magazine might be somewhat helpful, it's likely not going to affect life change or recovery. It really does come down to the interactions. And I really appreciate what Dr. Sheikh said about interacting with nature, learning from it. It's something that's been lost in Western society for a long time, because we so radiate towards the pill and the prescription, or the clinical models. I guess we have to ask ourselves, when do I feel best? What brings well-being to me? And unfortunately for me, it's anytime I'm in Hawaii in water the same temperature as my body. It's too expensive self-care, but it's good to reflect on, like, where do I feel best?
Yeah, I think that's a great question that we can ask ourselves. And it's interesting when you raise that, because as you were asking it out loud, Michael, or David, I thought, so where do I feel best? And I know for me, water, it can be rain, it can be an ocean, it can be a river. There's something for me that just sort of feels like I'm grounded with water. And then if you toss in a little bit of wind and some sunshine, I just feel immediately like I've got energy. Something happens for me.
Is that why you live in the Okanagan?
So I think what I'm getting from what you're saying, David, is that how we cope and how we heal is not going to look the same for everyone. And so we've really got to look carefully at what it is, the question you said, like, when do I feel the best and what works for me?
And we need to remember it's a long line, right? When Charmaine presented this project to me, the first words out of my mouth after she had presented it was, we didn't know where our team was. We lost our team. And I couldn't believe a few years after the fires, the emotion that waved over me, and Charmaine had to watch me ugly cry and do a bunch of things that I wasn't fully prepared for. So Mike, I completely understand. I hadn't really processed the experience myself, and being reminded of it in this powerful and visual way was part of my healing journey around being a leader in the midst of a battle we couldn't win, we couldn't overcome.
Yeah, thank you. And Michael and Dr. Sheikh, what about you in terms of what can people do to heal, and what are some tips or some strategies around improving our wellness and resilience? What about for you, Michael? Is there things that you've done to get through all this?
Yeah, well, one thing I'll say first before I give a tip is the one thing I noticed about this project for me is when I started it, we couldn't even say the word mental health. 5 years ago, we were using the word PTSD. So we talked about this of like, what are the effects of PTSD after a wildfire on the community? And just when you talk to an interviewee or anyone or even the partners, mental health was like almost a taboo word. And then, fast forward 5 years later, and now we have the shared experience of COVID, and all that's changed. We see mental health everywhere being discussed in the media, being discussed by celebrities and, and teachers and children. And I think this is a great chance for us to kind of really break down a lot of doors and barriers that were there before and have those conversations. And that's really like what this whole thing is about, is just, letting people know that, like, I remember like so many years when I first met David, he told me something along the lines of like, everyone has mental health. And that really resonated with me because like, I always thought like, oh, you have to be struggling to have like mental health. He's like, no, everyone has a level of mental health, right? And it can be affected on a daily basis. And that was like such a powerful thing. And that was like, late 2017, 2018, we were having that conversation. And now finally, I feel like we're at this place, and I hope, so I don't really have any like specific tools that helped me, but just by this simple change in society, I feel like I'm in a better place because I'm like so much more comfortable to talk about this. And like, even 5 years ago, I couldn't imagine like doing a panel and telling people I had struggled or or my experience, but I feel like we're all in a shared experience because of COVID. And I think this is a great opportunity to talk about, what's bothering you, whether it's a wildfire or maybe it's just a bad week, so.
Yeah, that's great, Michael. Thank you.
Thanks.
Dr. Sheikh.
For me, when I'm at my lowest low and when I'm emotionally dysregulated or depressed or anxious, or there's one question I'm beginning to ask myself: can I hold myself with love and care in these difficult moments? Do I love myself unconditionally or not?
Wow. Wow, that's a powerful question. Yeah. And I know, thank you for that. I love the depth of these questions for us to ask ourselves, because I'm getting from all of you in different ways the importance of self-reflection or self-review is a really important part of the process. Am I reading that right? You can give me a head either which way, but I'm hearing just that being self-aware is a really important part of this journey. Okay, I'm getting head nods. And I'll put it out to the audience again if you've got any other questions coming up. David, do you want to add something there?
I was going to say, and a healthy self-suspicion, not a critical voice in our lives, but one that asks questions about, you know, is what I'm feeling, is it overwhelming me? Or is it something that I'm handling in a different way than maybe I ever handled it before? Is this new for me, or have I been there before? I have staff who, you know, back and forth about going back to work in the workplace that we all occupied previously. And very often I'll say to them when they're fighting that battle, and we've never made anybody come back to work, but when they're fighting that battle, to say, what happened when you left the first time? What kind of things did you do? What were your experiences? And now, if you were to come back, because a lot of them are afraid of having to go back home if they come back to work, what would you have that you didn't have the first time? And those kinds of questions, I think, and it's about, you know, suspecting that there might be something more in us internally or externally in our community that can help us recover quicker, or bring us into a place of recovery quicker.
Yeah. You know, I was in a conversation with someone today, and we were talking about books that we've read over the years that have helped us. And man, oh man, we don't have enough time to go through my whole book list. But one thing that we were talking about is change and transition, and how that impacts our mental health and our state of well-being. And I remember a book that I read years and years ago, William Bridges, and I remember him talking about sort of when it feels like the old way is not out and the new way is not in, it's sort of like being in that middle zone, the messy zone. And I'm hearing a lot of people describe that right now, that what they used to do may not work, and the new way isn't in here yet, and they're sort of dancing in this zone of discomfort and uncertainty and just not knowing what is next. And I remember somebody described it like, do you remember Linus from the Peanuts cartoon? It's like Linus without a security blanket, like it's in the dryer, so it's close by, but it's not right in hand. And then the conversation continued talking about the importance for us exhibiting patience with one another, and showing up and being present. And your comment earlier, both you and Archie have talked about that. You know, it doesn't have to be perfect, but it's around showing up. And I'm just going to check the question box. We have another question here, and then I'll cue you all up. We've got another question, and then as we close out our night, after we do the questions, I'm going to give you an opportunity for a final word for each of you. So there's a comment here. I love the movie and the animation, very powerful, and we can all find ourselves in the characters. Oh, I really like how that was worded. If this was shown in a school, are there resources with the film or suggested resources or ways to work with the film? Awesome question. And yes, there are. We're working on several things. I'll speak to this, and then Michael and David might want to chime in. We've been working very closely with CMHA to create resources like a discussion discussion questions and some activities for students of different ages, and resources so that educators know who in their community they might be able to call in to their classroom or school to have a panel discussion. For example, watching the movie and then maybe having a panel discussion that has the school counselor and maybe somebody from a mental health organization, and maybe somebody who's a first responder, for example. So bringing together a panel, and there'll be information about that and resources. And then Michael's been working really hard as well on pulling some of these resources also into an app. So I really love that you've asked that question. I think it was Janet, because that was important to this project from the very beginning, and really appreciate you asking that. So yes. And Michael or David, was there anything you want to add to that question? Or that
I think a good deal of thought went into what could the potential impacts be of somebody watching this movie, and even around placing the language in the beginning of the movie, and in the way that we talk about it, that this is not a movie about a disaster. It's not a disaster movie like the Titanic. It's a movie about a community recovering, and it still has traumatic aspects in it. So it's not a movie to watch alone, and it's certainly not one to plunk your kids down in front of. But it was important to us that along with the movie came, easy to access, simple to use resources that could be used on a family level, a community group level, school, workplace. And those are coming together, as I understand, quite nicely. And much that I've seen, I just am very, very excited to be able to offer that to the community or community groups.
Yeah, thank you. Michael, did you have anything to add?
Yeah, just quickly, I guess, as David mentioned, we took a great deal of care and consideration in reviewing every word of the screenplay, as well as, the support resources, and partnered with, CMHA to help create some of those. And also the app we've been working on. We have an incredible interactive app that will be released with the movie in October. And it'll include, everything from questions, a quiz and question and answer with, for children of going through the movie, how did it make them feel? And, the movie we took a lot of intention in designing this, of little things to point out for children to go through. So our reading comprehension is definitely built through that. We'll have the ability to color and create their own characters as well through the app. So you can color each character of the film and create your own character. There'll be a sing along of all the music. We had 4 songs and a score, written and produced by Grammy Award winners. So they'll have the opportunity to do sing-alongs as well as that. And then they'll have a little section of the app where they can kind of write their own story. And all this can be, shared or downloaded. And yeah, and we'll have more as we get closer to the release, but I'm really, really excited with the app and releasing that with the film.
Yeah. And I think the resources will be kind of one of these building as we go as well, because I think people will, as people raise questions, and as schools have panels, as you indicated, Janet, as schools have presentations, that'll provide us with more questions or have a better sense of even what else would be helpful, so that we can continually add to it. And I know even things like CMHA and I were working on coloring pages. So having downloadable coloring pages with a mental health or wellness tip at the bottom. So there'll be lots that families can utilize, and schools and educators, as well as community groups that want to use the screening as a way of bringing people in their community together. So what a rich dialogue tonight to our amazing panelists. And as we close out the night, first of all, I'm going to come to you all to just give us a few parting words or some wisdom as we end tonight, but just also wanted to really thank our hosts for tonight, and to thank all of you, the attendees, for coming on, because this is exactly why this movie was created, to inspire conversation about mental health. And tonight's session is how we do this. So I really appreciate all of you being here. I appreciate you asking the questions. We want to stay in touch with you, so make sure you follow the movie, connect with us on socials, and let's keep this conversation going, because this is how change really happens. So let me go to our panelists for some final thoughts. Michael, I'm going to go to you first, and then to Dr. Sheikh, and then David. What final thought as we close out the night?
Okay, final thought. Okay. Well, first, I'm just going to thank everyone who took the time to listen to this today and come on. It really means the world, and I love having the opportunity to share our story. So I really thank you, because as Charmaine mentioned, that's the whole purpose of why we created this. And my last thought is, I will challenge the audience to reach out to one person and just ask them if they're okay, whether it be a friend or family. If there's anyone that you think might benefit from that, you got to ask someone. You can't say no. So I'll challenge you there. And again, thank you everyone for listening today.
I love that. So reaching out and doing that check-in. Thanks, Michael. And Archie, what about for you?
Michael, I'm going to fail your challenge, I guess. I'll try.
It's okay. I'll give you a pass, but no one else.
It's confidential. Well, congratulations to all of you for creating this animation movie. I really want to watch it. I love animation movies. I actually go to the multiplex to watch animation movies.
Oh, wow.
It's not just relatable to children, it's very much relatable to myself. And I would like to use educational resources in my classroom too. I don't know if you were thinking about university students or not.
Yeah.
But I'm sure I can.
That'd be amazing. Yeah, this is for all ages. You know, this is that's the goal. Any opportunity to be in your classroom or any other university out there, we would welcome that.
And thank you for inviting me to be part of this panel. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much, and thanks for sharing your wisdom with us. David.
It's been such an honor to be with Dr. Sheikh and Mike and Charmaine, having this conversation and realizing that we're right on the cusp of the movie being released. And I can, years ago when we first talked about this project, I couldn't imagine, or I couldn't get out of the way all of the questions, the yeah buts, like, have you thought about this, Charmaine? Did you think about this, Mike? Are you going to do this? Because that's often the way we approach projects. And as we started to work on this project, we started to realize that that home is a really important thing, and home means something different to everybody. It's not a conventional picture of maybe what we saw in our readers in grade 1 or something like that. But the whole idea of being able to come back home. And maybe it's altered, maybe it's changed, but what home means to us and what that homeostasis, I guess, is, you know, that stability. And when it's disrupted, the idea that it's possible to come back is something that people need to know. We need that message of hope. There is a place to come back to. It may be changed, it may be different, but we get to come back. In time, over time, and that I think is so compelling. I remember when the working title changed and went to that, it just settled with me and with our team, our provincial team. And so we're very keen to see and participate in what waves of information and insight will come from this project. It's been such a privilege to be a part of it.
Thank you, David. And Michael, maybe you should give up the goods where kind of what the release plan is, because October 2nd is kind of an exciting day in our world, and then people might want to know how and when they'll be able to watch it in their world. So maybe if you can share that, and then I'll just read the final comments here.
Yeah, for sure. I just got to say, David, I love you, and thank you for those kind words at the end there. It makes me so emotional because, like, you know, it was one of the, like, I wanted to work with CMHA so bad in this project, and you pitch it, and I know how many people are pitching projects to CMHA and other nonprofit organizations. So to like get to work with them was a really dream come true. And so we're gearing up for the release on October 2nd and 3rd at the Edmonton International Film Festival, 35th year anniversary. And this is the first time a short film's ever gotten its own screening. So it was a huge honor to have that. So we got our own theater. On October 2nd, we play at 2 o'clock, 4:30, and 6:30 p.m., as well as 5:45 on the Sunday, October 3rd. The Saturday showings are at the Garneau or Metro Theatre in Edmonton. And on the Sunday night, it would be at the Landmark Cinema downtown. And starting on October 3rd, all the way till the 31st, it will also be available on the Edmonton International online platform, which is available on Apple TV and several other online platforms as well. So you can find information about that at the Edmonton International website. And we challenge anyone to go out and watch the movie and give us a share and show us some love. And again, yeah, just thank you for listening today.
Awesome. And we'll keep everyone posted about when there's screenings that might happen to be close to you and your community as well.
Yeah, lots more coming. So we have Vancouver after that at the end of the month of October. And then we'll be looking to roll this across Canada. We have some more plans with that, but ultimately, you know, this will be a free tool, and we want as many people to be able to watch this as possible.
Thanks, Michael.
So great.
And then just a few comments from our guests tonight. A big thank you to all the panelists. From Mary and Grace says, thank you so much for this powerful session. That would be brilliant, which was related to the educational resources for colleges and university, and another comment on that as well, that it'd be great to have those higher ed resources. So we are definitely going to look at that. That was a great suggestion. And thank you again to our hosts for having us tonight to bring together a conversation. Again, to our panelists, I deeply appreciate you and look forward to a lot more conversations as we go forward.
Thank you.